Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Friendship is the central theme of the entire series. We all know about the loyalty and mutual support between Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but beyond them, there is another group whose relationships became a model of friendship in the magical world. This is the group known as the Marauders, whose adventures have become a true source of inspiration for fan fictions and many theories. Today I'll share some interesting facts that you may have noticed in the books or films, but perhaps didn't pay attention to. Enjoy watching. Number 1. The name Marauders, created by fans. When we talk about the Marauders, the first thing that comes to mind is their famous nickname, which became synonymous with James Potter's group of friends. However, in the books by J.K. Rowling, there is never any mention of them calling themselves by this name. In fact, the word Marauders appeared only on the Marauders map, where it was used to refer to the four friends. Perhaps it was simply chosen to give the magical map a more attractive name. Number 2. The order of events on the map. Everything happened in reverse. When Harry first explored the Marauders map, he read the names of the friends, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Unfortunately, the fates of these four characters unfolded in reverse order from how they were presented on the map. First, James Potter, Padfoot, died, then Sirius Black, Prongs, followed by Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, and finally Remus Lupin, Moony, fell in the Battle of Hogwarts. This is quite an interesting detail that remains uncommented on by Rowling, but it adds a certain symbolism to the story. Number 3. Sirius Black, the oldest Marauder, possibly. When it comes to the age of the Marauders, the exact birth dates of many of them are unknown. However, in 2015, J.K. Rowling revealed that Sirius Black was born on November 3, 1959. We know that James Potter was born on March 27, 1960, and Remus Lupin on March 10, 1960, making Remus just a few days older than James. Since Peter Pettigrew's birthdate was not revealed, it is assumed that Sirius was probably the oldest of the Marauders. Number 4. Animagus, a reflection of personality. The friendship of the Marauders was so strong that they decided to become animagi, wizards who can transform into animals at will. Interestingly, each of them transformed into an animal that directly reflected their personality. Sirius became a dog, loyal, brave, and faithful. James turned into a stag, symbolizing leadership and nobility. Peter, on the other hand, transformed into a rat, which perhaps needs no further explanation. This metamorphosis perfectly illustrates the inner nature of each of them. Number 5. The Marauders map doesn't cover all of Hogwarts. When the Weasley twins handed Harry the Marauders map, they said it showed absolutely everything in Hogwarts. Every room, every hallway, every secret passage. However, this is not entirely true. The map doesn't capture two key areas. The first is the Room of Requirement, which has unique magical properties that make it difficult to reflect on the map. The second is the Chamber of Secrets, which at the time the map was created was just a myth, so it couldn't appear on the map. Number 6. Peter Pettigrew could have been in another house. When discussing how the fates of the Marauders might have turned out differently, it's interesting to note that Peter Pettigrew nearly ended up in another house. Even though they all attended Gryffindor, Peter had to undergo a long test from the Sorting Hat. The hat had doubts because Peter showed traits that were characteristic of Slytherins. Only after 5 minutes of contemplation was Peter placed into Gryffindor. Number 7. Lupin's fate and his unexpected end. Remus Lupin was one of the most important characters for Harry, his mentor, protector, and friend. However, throughout the series, J.K. Rowling dealt with him the same way she did with other beloved characters. It was expected that Lupin would survive the end of the story and find happiness. But, according to Rowling, she originally planned a different ending for Lupin, where he would have been able to build a happier life. Number 8. James Potter's legacy in Quidditch. Harry inherited many traits from his father James, including his love for Quidditch. In the movie Philosopher's Stone, Harry sees a plaque that says James Potter was the seeker for Gryffindor. However, in 2000, a year before the movie's release, Rowling announced that James was actually a chaser. This interesting discrepancy between the books and the movies became a topic of discussion among fans. Number 9. Sirius and James. A friendship that became family. The friendship between Sirius Black and James Potter is one of the most heartfelt and profound bonds in the Harry Potter series. Sirius grew up in a family rife with prejudice and dark traditions. His parents, the Black family, valued blood purity above all else, leaving him suffocated by hatred and isolation. When he was just 16, James and his family welcomed him into their home, offering him a refuge from the toxic environment that had nearly consumed him. As Sirius later reflected, "James's family saved me. They gave me something I never had, a real family." That warmth from the Potters shaped Sirius into the man he became. For the first time he experienced the love and support that come with true family bonds. It was no surprise then when he became Harry's godfather, taking on a role of great significance and promise. Even after James's death, Sirius remained unwavering in his loyalty to his late friend. He spent his life honoring James's memory, showing that true friendship, like the one he shared with James, can indeed be stronger than blood ties. "I will always protect him, just as I promised," Sirius declared, proving that friendship can become family in the truest sense of the word. Number 10. Who really created the map? For years, fans believed that all 4 Marauders played an equal role in creating the Marauders map. But as J.K. Rowling revealed in interviews, the truth is more nuanced. Remus Lupin's contribution, he admitted, was primarily ideological. His keen senses and awareness during his transformations allowed him to understand the magical properties of Hogwarts, particularly its secret corners. "Remus always had an instinct for the hidden parts of the castle," James once remarked. "It was his sharp perception that helped the others navigate the castle's hidden pathways." However, the real magic and technical work behind the map were the domain of James Potter and Sirius Black. Their natural brilliance and love for mischief drove the creation of the map. They used their skills to enchant the parchment and make it come alive, allowing them to see every corner of Hogwarts and track anyone within its walls. "James and Sirius were the true creators," Remus once said, acknowledging their genius. As for Peter Pettigrew, his role was far less significant. His contribution was more of a supportive one, hardly surprising given his later betrayal. "Peter was always more of a follower," Sirius noted, reflecting on how his lack of initiative marked his actions, even in their youthful adventures. Number 11. Why Lupin was never a prefect? Remus Lupin was always the most responsible and serious of the Marauders, the one who could be counted on to make the right decision. It seemed only natural that he should have been chosen as head boy at Hogwarts. Yet in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, it's revealed that Lily Evans, not Remus, was made head girl. In a quiet conversation with Harry, Remus confided that Dumbledore had purposely decided against appointing him. "He thought I wouldn't be able to stop you lot from causing trouble," Remus explained, referring to his friend's mischievous ways. Despite this, Remus still served as the moral compass for the Marauders. Even without the badge, He was the voice of reason that guided James and Sirius, keeping their wild antics in check. "Remus always kept us grounded," Sirius once remarked, remembering how his friend would remind them to think of the consequences. It wasn't the title that defined Remus, it was his steady character, his ability to be a true leader, even without the authority of the position. Number 12. Peter Pettigrew and the Secret Hideout. Peter Pettigrew is often seen as the traitor, the one who betrayed his friends to Lord Voldemort. Yet there's a part of his story that is rarely discussed, a moment of genuine friendship that speaks to his character before he turned. During their school years, when Remus Lupin struggled with his lycanthropy, it was Peter who came up with the idea to create a secret refuge for him. Located near the Forbidden Forest, this hideaway gave Remus a place to recover after his transformations, a safe space where he could escape the cruel world that often judged him. This refuge would later inspire the creation of the famous Room of Requirement, though the room itself existed long before the Marauders made use of it. What Peter did for Remus was a quiet act of kindness, one that showed a side of him rarely seen in the years to come. Despite the selfish choices he would later make, in those days, Peter was not just a follower. He was a friend who thought of others, even when it meant sacrificing his own comfort. It's easy to forget these moments when we focus only on Peter's betrayal, but they offer a glimpse into the complexity of his character. When James, Sirius, and Remus learned about Peter's betrayal, they surely remembered these small acts of kindness from their school days. "He was our friend," Sirius once said, voice tinged with disbelief. "How could he turn so quickly?" Peter's support for Remus, however fleeting, was a reminder that even in the darkest moments of his life, there was once a time when he showed true loyalty. Number 13, the quiet influence of Lily Evans. Lily Evans had a profound impact on James Potter, one that shaped him into the man he became. From the very first year at Hogwarts, James was deeply in love with her. His admiration often led him to perform daring feats, some of which bordered on foolishness. He was determined to impress her, whether by showing off his Quidditch skills or attempting pranks with his friends. But Lily, ever the voice of reason, did not find these antics endearing. In fact, she often scolded James for his immature behavior, especially when it came to bullying others. Over time, Lily's influence began to change James. He started to recognize the importance of kindness and respect, lessons he learned through her words and actions. "You're just a bully, James Potter," Lily had once told him, challenging him to become better. Slowly but surely, the reckless young man evolved into someone more thoughtful, compassionate, and most importantly, worthy of Lily's love. It was through this relationship that James found the strength to mature, shedding his old impulsive tendencies. His transformation was not just for her, but for himself as well. This change in James also had a lasting effect on his friendships with Sirius, Remus, and Peter. Their bond was strengthened by James's newfound sense of responsibility. The love he shared with Lily was not just romantic, it was the catalyst that helped him become a better friend, and ultimately, a better man. As Sirius once said, James grew up because of her. He became the man we all respected. Lily's influence on James was the key to the Marauders' enduring friendship, shaping their lives and ensuring that their bond lasted well beyond their time at Hogwarts. Number 14. Why Lupin never tried to cure himself. Remus Lupin never sought a cure for his lycanthropy, despite the vast healing magic available in the wizarding world. Many would have searched for a way to rid themselves of such a curse, but Lupin accepted his fate. J.K. Rowling explained that lycanthropy is one of the few magical conditions that cannot be fully healed. For Lupin, this truth was a burden he carried, but he never allowed it to break him. He sought help from various healers, but only one person truly eased his suffering: Severus Snape. Snape, whose hatred of Lupin was well known, still found a way to help. He created a potion known as the Wolf's Bane, which allowed Lupin to retain his human mind during his transformations. It was not a cure, but it made his condition more bearable. "The potion works, it just takes the edge off," Lupin would often say. Despite this, Lupin never looked for more than what Snape could give him, understanding that some things simply couldn't be fixed. Rather than dwelling on what could not be changed, Lupin focused on what he could offer to others. He used his own experience to guide and support his students at Hogwarts, becoming a beloved defense against the dark arts professor. His strength wasn't in fighting the curse, but in accepting it and using it as a means to grow. "We are all human," he would remind them, showing that courage comes from within, no matter the obstacles. Lupin's acceptance of his condition became a lesson for everyone around him. His friends, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, saw in him a strength that wasn't tied to being perfect, but to being brave in the face of hardship. Lupin's greatest strength was not his ability to fight the curse, but his decision to live with it and make the world a better place despite it. His story inspired those who knew him to embrace their own flaws and continue to fight for what mattered. Number 15, James Potter, was a skilled duelist. James Potter was not just a prankster or a skilled Quidditch player. He was also a formidable duelist. At Hogwarts, his talent for combat magic stood out. Professor McGonagall once remarked, "James was one of the most skilled duelists Hogwarts had seen in decades. He wasn't just naturally gifted, he put in hours of practice." Alongside his best friend, Sirius Black, James honed complex spells and moves, preparing himself for whatever dangers lay ahead. His dedication to mastering dueling paid off when the dark times arrived. As a member of the Order of the Phoenix, James's talents became vital in the fight against the Death Eaters. He didn't hesitate when it came to protecting those he loved. One notable confrontation was with Bellatrix Lestrange, a dangerous and unyielding Death Eater. James held his ground, showing the world that his abilities weren't just for show. Even though he wasn't killed in battle, his skills proved invaluable. In the end, it wasn't his wand that made him a hero. It was his heart. James had a natural ability to shield his family and friends. He made sure they were safe, even when the odds seemed impossible. His bravery was more than just his strength in duels. It was in his willingness to fight for those who mattered most. When James Potter died, it was not in a duel. But his legacy lived on in every spell he cast, every life he protected. His magical prowess wasn't just something he used for glory, it was a shield for the people he loved. "He could have been a great Auror," said Sirius once, remembering James's passion for defending others. That passion was what made him unforgettable. Number 16, what happened to Pettigrew's wand? The Death Eaters had long been a shadow over the wizarding world, and in many ways the Marauders' story was wrapped up in that shadow. Among the Marauders, Peter Pettigrew had always been the least significant, the most pitiful, and the one who least deserved to be part of that heroic quartet of James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and the great Harry Potter. His betrayal of his closest friends and his eventual fall into the arms of the Dark Lord marked a tragic end for a once promising young wizard. But there was one detail, a seemingly insignificant one, that fans pondered for years. What happened to Peter Pettigrew's wand after his death. When Harry and his friends stood at the grave of their childhood nemesis, Peter's body laid in the Malfoy mansion, a stark reminder of his cowardice and betrayal. In the film, the scene was brief, yet many fans noted the absence of one particular detail: Pettigrew's wand. In the book, there was no immediate mention of it either. The scene was one of finality. A long-forgotten, unremarkable wizard met his end, and there was no trace left of the tool that once symbolized his magic. Yet in an interview with The Times in 2007, J.K. Rowling offered an intriguing nugget of information about the wand's fate. She confirmed what fans had long suspected. The wand had been broken the moment Pettigrew died. Not only had Peter lost his life in that final tragic act, but he had also lost the last remaining connection to the world of magic. There would be no resurrection for his wand, no moments of redemption, no magical power lingering in the broken wood. The wand, much like its master, had reached the end of its story. This seemingly trivial detail carries a heavy significance when considering the broader themes of the Harry Potter saga. For Pettigrew, who had once been a promising wizard, whose magical prowess had been matched only by the bond of friendship he shared with the Marauders, the breaking of his wand marked the true culmination of his fall from grace. His wand had been an instrument of power, a tool of magic that allowed him to perform the most extraordinary feats, and yet, in the end, it was as disposable as he had been in his moment of need. Peter's betrayal was complete, not just when he handed James and Lily over to Voldemort, but in the aftermath of his own life. His wand's destruction highlighted a fundamental truth. He was no longer part of the magical world. He had cast away his loyalties, his morals, and ultimately his link to the very world that had once embraced him. Pettigrew's life, fraught with moments of cowardice and self-interest, had ended with no grand gesture, no redemption arc, and no legacy. The wand's breakage symbolized that final severing of ties to the magical community, an irreversible act of forsaking his past. The Marauders had left behind an enduring legacy of bravery, loyalty, and friendship. James and Lily Potter, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin each had their place in the history of magic, their contributions having shaped the wizarding world for good. But Peter Pettigrew's legacy was not defined by loyalty or bravery. His fate was sealed not by the grand decisions he made, but by the smallest, most selfish actions he ever took. By betraying his friends, he lost everything, and the breaking of his wand confirmed the full extent of his betrayal. Wands in the wizarding world are more than mere instruments. They are a reflection of their owners, an extension of their very being. The choices a wizard makes, the way they conduct themselves, and their very nature are all reflected in the way their wand behaves. Consider the wands of Harry, Voldemort, or Dumbledore, each representing the power and character of their owners. Harry's wand, with its twin core, symbolized his connection to Voldemort and the link that would forever tie them. Voldemort's wand, a mere vessel for his monstrous ambitions, reflected his greed for power and control. But Pettigrew's wand was different. It wasn't the wand of a great wizard, nor one capable of extraordinary feats. It was a tool for someone who could only deceive, hide, and run. In its final moments, when it broke upon his death, it did not symbolically lose the power of the wizard who wielded it. It was merely an extension of Pettigrew's own pathetic end. It was just another tool discarded at the end of a short and uneventful life. Number 17, Sirius's unique Patronus. In the magical world of Harry Potter, the ability to conjure a Patronus is one of the most impressive feats a witch or wizard can achieve. A Patronus is a powerful magical charm that takes the form of an animal representing the caster's inner strength and personality. However, the case of Sirius Black's Patronus is particularly intriguing as it is deeply connected to his animagus form, an aspect of magic that not only sets him apart from others but also gives us a unique glimpse into his soul and his most profound desires. Sirius Black's Patronus, a large, formidable dog, was no mere coincidence. In fact, it was the perfect reflection of both his magical ability and his deeply ingrained sense of loyalty and protection. This animal form, which mirrored his animagus form, raised an interesting question in the magical community. How could someone's Patronus and animagus form be so closely linked? After all, these two magical abilities, though both extremely rare and difficult to master, typically express different aspects of a wizard or witch's character. A Patronus, for example, is said to reflect the inner nature of the caster's personality, while an animagus form is often shaped by the practitioner's own magical prowess and the desire to embody a certain quality or aspect of life. But Sirius's case was different. His Patronus was more than just a reflection of his abilities. It was a manifestation of his emotional core. Sirius Black's connection to the dog as a symbol goes beyond the simple fact that it was his animagus form. For Sirius, the dog represented something much more profound. It symbolized his unwavering loyalty to those he loved, especially his friends and later, Harry Potter. As a young man, Sirius was often seen as rebellious, quick to anger, and frequently at odds with the expectations placed upon him by his aristocratic family. He was a Black born into a prestigious pure-blood family with a history steeped in dark magic. But Sirius rejected the family's values from the very start. He couldn't bear the bigotry and hatred that his family embodied. This rejection made him an outcast, not just from his family, but from the wizarding world at large. The dog, as his Patronus, became a symbol of his independence, a creature that was both fiercely loyal and free-spirited. It reflected his need to protect and his desire to break away from the constraints that had been imposed upon him. When we consider Sirius's relationship with Harry Potter, the dog form of his Patronus becomes even more significant. Sirius was not only Harry's godfather, but he was also one of the few people who truly understood the depth of Harry's grief and loss. Harry had lost his parents at a young age, and in many ways, Sirius became the father figure Harry had always longed for. As Harry grew older, Sirius's protective nature became more evident. The large dog that was Sirius's Patronus was a reflection of that protective instinct. It was a magical representation of Sirius's determination to keep Harry safe, no matter the cost. The fact that his Patronus took the form of a dog is significant because it speaks to the fierce devotion he felt for those he loved. A dog is often seen as a companion, a protector, and a symbol of unconditional loyalty, all traits that defined Sirius Black. There is a particular moment in the series that brings Sirius's Patronus into focus. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry and Hermione are trapped by a large group of Dementors on the shores of the Black Lake, Sirius's Patronus becomes the beacon of hope that saves them. At a time when Harry believes he is about to succumb to the Dementors' fatal effects, a huge silver dog appears, charging toward the creatures and scattering them. Harry, in that moment, is unaware that the Patronus belongs to Sirius, but he is struck by the idea that this creature is here to protect him, a reflection of the very bond that exists between them. It is Sirius's deep, abiding need to protect Harry, to stand between him and harm, that is manifested through the Patronus. It's as if the dog knows exactly what Harry needs when he needs it. Another compelling aspect of Sirius's Patronus is the way it connects to his own personal history. As a child, Sirius had been surrounded by the cold and distant figures of his family. His parents were cruel and unforgiving, and the Black family was notorious for its unwavering support of pure-blood supremacy and dark magic. Sirius, however, rebelled against this, finding solace and companionship with his friends, most notably James Potter, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. These friendships became his family. In a way, the dog, as his Patronus, became a symbol of his newfound sense of belonging, a beacon of his loyalty to his friends and his commitment to protect those he held dear. The dog as a Patronus also speaks to Sirius's emotional depth. While many might view him as the rebellious, fun-loving marauder, Sirius harbored an immense amount of pain and regret over the choices he made in his youth. His animosity toward his family was clear, but so too was his unyielding desire to protect his friends and the people he cared about. He never wanted to be a victim of his family's cruelty. Instead, he longed to be a hero, to fight back against the injustice that had been wrought upon him. His Patronus, the dog, reflects this inner conflict. Dogs are often associated with both aggression and tenderness, mirroring the duality in Sirius's own nature. He was a warrior, someone who would fight fiercely for what he believed in, but also someone with a capacity for deep love and devotion. Number 18, the hidden meaning behind the Marauders' nicknames. The Marauders, as they are known in the Harry Potter series, remain one of the most intriguing and beloved groups of characters in the wizarding world. Their names are not only clever and memorable, but each one also serves as a window into the unique personalities and destinies of the four friends. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew chose nicknames for themselves that were more than simple aliases. These names held symbolic meaning, reflecting both their abilities and their personalities in ways that are still being uncovered by fans and scholars of the series. Today, James Potter, known as Prongs, was the leader of the Marauders, and his nickname speaks volumes about his character. In the magical world, James was a gifted wizard and a natural-born leader, but his nickname wasn't just a play on his talent, it symbolized his strength and pride. Prongs referred to his animagus form, a majestic stag. The stag is a symbol of power, dignity, and grace, and in many ways James embodied these traits. He was not just the head of his group of friends, but he also took on a role of protection for others, particularly Harry Potter. His ability to transform into a stag, a creature known for its elegance and strength, also suggests his deep connection to nature and his noble heart. There is something deeply symbolic about the stag, an animal that represents both the ability to protect and a certain regal nature, qualities that James carried within him. He was the protector, both as a father and a friend, someone who would charge into any situation without hesitation for those he loved. Sirius Black, his best friend and co-conspirator in all things mischief, was given the nickname Padfoot. This name reflected not just his animagus form, a large black dog, but also his inner qualities, loyalty, courage, and a sense of freedom. Dogs have long been symbols of faithfulness, and Sirius embodied that loyalty both to his friends and to the fight against injustice. Throughout the series, Sirius is shown to be a fiercely loyal character, willing to risk everything for those he loved. His connection to the dog is also significant in how it mirrors his personal life. Like a dog, Sirius often found himself on the outside looking in, isolated and misunderstood by his family, but always searching for belonging. The dog also represents the idea of freedom, something Sirius held dear. He was not bound by the constraints of his aristocratic family, nor by the norms that defined most of wizarding society. Sirius, like the dog, was free-spirited and rebellious, running headlong into danger without a second thought if it meant standing up for what he believed was right. Then there was Remus Lupin, the kind-hearted, wise and reserved marauder, whose nickname was Moony. This nickname, unlike the others, was directly tied to his condition as a werewolf. Remus Lupin was cursed to transform every month under the full moon into a terrifying beast. His animagus form was a wolf, but more importantly, his condition was inextricably linked to the cycles of the moon, making his nickname a perfect reflection of his life. Lupin's transformation was a painful and isolating experience, yet he chose to face it with quiet dignity and grace. He was deeply ashamed of what he had become, but the Marauders, his friends, never judged him. Instead, they embraced him, and they went to great lengths to ensure that Remus would not be alone during his transformations. His nickname, Moony, was a reminder of his humanity, the part of him that was not defined by his curse, but by his friendship and loyalty. It also symbolized the cyclical nature of his struggles, his constant fight against the monster within him. The moon became not just a literal part of Remus's life, but a symbol of his internal battle between good and evil, control and chaos. Despite the pain and danger that came with his condition, Remus showed strength through acceptance, facing his fears every month without ever letting them define him completely. Finally, there was Peter Pettigrew, who bore the unfortunate and telling nickname Wormtail. This name was perhaps the most fitting, as it encapsulated his character in a way that no other could. Peter was the least remarkable of the Marauders in many ways. He was not as brave as James, as loyal as Sirius, or as wise as Remus. Instead, Peter was often seen as a follower, someone who was more interested in survival than in doing what was right. His animagus form, a rat, is a perfect metaphor for his personality: small, cowardly, and always sneaking about. Rats in many cultures are associated with treachery, betrayal, and fear, and Peter lived up to this image. Throughout the series, we learn that Peter's desire to stay alive and his willingness to betray those closest to him was the defining aspect of his character. He betrayed his friends, leading to the downfall of James and Lily Potter, and his actions ultimately paved the way for Voldemort's return. His nickname, Wormtail, speaks to his craven nature, the way he would slink around, always following stronger personalities instead of standing up for what he believed in. Unlike his friends, Peter lacked the courage to stand firm in his convictions, and it was this lack of bravery that led him down a dark path. His rat form, forever running and hiding, mirrored his own inability to confront his fears or his past. Each of the Marauders' nicknames was a reflection of who they were, of their strengths, their weaknesses, and their roles within the group. These names were not chosen lightly, and they were deeply symbolic of each character's journey. James, the proud leader, the protector; Sirius, the loyal and free-spirited rebel; Remus, the quiet and brave soul, fighting against his inner demons; and Peter, the fearful and treacherous rat, running from responsibility. Number 19, what happened to James Potter's family home? The story of the Potter family home, nestled in Godric's Hollow, is one of immense tragedy and historic significance. While the tragic deaths of James and Lily Potter marked the end of their lives in that cherished home, what most don't know is that the Potters had another estate, one of far greater luxury and affluence, located not too far from London. This second home belonged to James's parents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, both wealthy and respected members of the wizarding community. Fleamont and Euphemia had long enjoyed the comforts of their lavish estate, one that stood as a testament to their success. Fleamont was well known for his magical ingenuity, having created the Sleekeazy's hair potion, which revolutionized the way wizards styled their hair. Euphemia, though less famed, was equally involved in the magical world, and together they built a life that many in the wizarding community would envy. Their estate was a grand manor, adorned with rich tapestries and antique furnishings, with sweeping gardens filled with exotic magical plants. The estate was their sanctuary, away from the hustle of magical society, but it was also a place where they could be at ease, knowing they had achieved great success. However, tragedy struck when Fleamont and Euphemia died unexpectedly. The loss was a heavy blow to their only son James, who inherited the manor. It was here, in this home, that James Potter grew up before becoming a prominent figure in the wizarding world. Though he would eventually marry Lily Evans and raise his own family in Godric's Hollow, the estate near London remained in his possession. It was, after all, a part of his legacy. James never fully abandoned the manor. It remained as a place where he could retreat to when he needed to escape the pressures of his life as a key figure in the Order of the Phoenix. Upon James's death, the fate of the house became a matter of importance once again. Though it was his childhood home, the estate near London was eventually passed into the hands of his godfather, Sirius Black. Sirius, like James, had been raised in a world of wealth and power, but his own family had been steeped in dark magic and twisted ideologies. The house, unlike the Potter's humble abode in Godric's Hollow, became a sanctuary for Sirius, a place where he could find peace away from the grim realities of the Black family. Sirius loved the manor deeply, perhaps not for its grandeur, but for the memories it held of the happier times with James. For many years, Sirius cherished the home, holding on to the ties that bound him to James's family. However, things would take a darker turn for him. His wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban, a result of a betrayal by his closest friend, Peter Pettigrew, led to the abandonment of the house. The manor, once vibrant with life and laughter, was left empty, standing as a cold reminder of the injustices that Sirius had suffered. In the books there is little mention of what ultimately happened to this significant property after Sirius was imprisoned. The last time it is referenced, it is a place devoid of warmth or care, just an empty shell of a once great home. However, J.K. Rowling later confirmed in an interview that the fate of the Potter family's manor near London did not end in desolation. Upon Sirius's arrest and his subsequent absence from the wizarding world, the Ministry of Magic took control of the estate. But the Ministry, ever the bureaucratic institution, saw an opportunity in the once proud manor. Rather than leaving the estate to be sold off or left to decay, the Ministry transformed it into something more meaningful. It became a refuge for those who had been affected by the horrors of the First Wizarding War. The manor, once a symbol of aristocratic pride, became a symbol of hope and recovery, providing shelter for those who had lost everything in the conflict. This transformation into a sanctuary for the war-torn masses reflects the Ministry's recognition of the need to rebuild not just the physical structures of the wizarding world, but the spirits of its people. For the survivors, the manor became a symbol of resilience. It was here that they could find a temporary escape from the aftermath of war, a place where they could heal and regroup after enduring the ravages of dark magic. Though it was a far cry from the grandeur it had once known, the manor's new role provided a sense of solace in the face of devastation. The change in the estate's purpose was a reflection of the times. The First Wizarding War had left the wizarding world shattered, with many families losing their homes, their loved ones, and their hope. The Potters, once a family of great influence and wealth, were gone, and their legacy, like so many others, had been swallowed by the war's chaos. But despite the loss, the manor near London endured, its walls now echoing with the quiet sounds of healing. Those who sought refuge there were not concerned with its past splendor. Instead, they found comfort in its new role as a symbol of survival and recovery. In this way, the Potter family home near London became not only a place of personal history for James and Sirius, but also a larger symbol of the changes that the wizarding world underwent in the aftermath of the war. The house that had once been a beacon of wealth and privilege was now a place of respite and renewal for those in need. It is a quiet testament to the resilience of the magical community, showing that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a new beginning. Sirius's death, too, was a tragic blow, and with it, the manor was once again left uninhabited. By the time Harry Potter came of age, the estate had long since passed from his family's hands, and it was not something he was ever able to reclaim. He never had the opportunity to return to the manor and reconnect with the legacy of his parents. Instead, he was left with the memories of their home in Godric's Hollow, where they had made their final stand. That house, too, would forever carry the weight of tragedy, but it was also a place of great significance in Harry's own journey. The lost manor, though not directly a part of Harry's life, represents the hidden depths of his family's history. It shows that even in the wizarding world, where families like the Potters held such status and wealth, there is no permanence. The manor that had once belonged to his grandparents had passed through the hands of his father and his godfather, only to be repurposed by the ministry. It was a symbol of change, a reminder that in the world of magic, as in life, nothing is ever truly set in stone. Despite its many transformations, the manor will forever be intertwined with the story of the Potters. It is a place that Harry, though he never saw it for himself, would no doubt have wanted to return to. It represents not just his lineage, but the sacrifices made by those who came before him. Even as the wizarding world sought to rebuild, the manor's place in history was assured. It would never be just a building. It would always be a symbol of family, loss, survival, and hope. Number 20. Which professors knew about Lupin's secret? The story of Remus Lupin, the beloved Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts, is shrouded in secrecy and mystery, much like the man himself. His condition, lycanthropy, was a closely guarded secret, not only from the students, but also from the majority of the staff. As a werewolf, Lupin had to contend with the difficulties of managing his condition while striving to be the teacher he knew the students deserved. The fact that he was able to maintain such a delicate balance speaks volumes about his strength of character. However, the truth of his condition was not hidden from everyone. Certain individuals at Hogwarts were aware of his secret, and their understanding of his situation adds another layer of intrigue to his story. Chief among those who knew were Professor Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and Madame Pomfrey, but the most surprising revelation of all is that Severus Snape, the notoriously secretive and often vindictive potions master, also suspected Lupin's true nature. It is a testament to the complexity of life at Hogwarts that so many people knew of Lupin's secret, and yet no one ever openly acknowledged it. Of course, Albus Dumbledore was the first and most important person who ensured that Lupin's werewolf condition remained concealed. Dumbledore, with his wisdom and compassion, not only allowed Lupin to take up a teaching post at the school, but also took it upon himself to personally guarantee his safety, providing that the magical protections necessary to allow him to stay at Hogwarts during the full moon. In his own way, Dumbledore was one of the few who truly understood Lupin, offering him the kind of respect and care that many others, including the students, might have failed to offer. Professor McGonagall, another key figure, also knew of Lupin's condition. She was one of the few professors who would have been able to discern something unusual about Lupin's behavior, particularly after his bouts of illness when he would disappear, only to return looking weak and disoriented. McGonagall, who had always shown a deep sense of loyalty to Dumbledore, was naturally inclined to trust his judgment and would have kept Lupin's secret. Her strong sense of duty to Hogwarts, as well as her respect for the students' safety, likely made her more protective of Lupin, even if it meant keeping such an extraordinary secret. Madame Pomfrey, the school's nurse, was in a unique position to be aware of Lupin's condition. It was well known that she had treated him after his monthly transformations, tending to his injuries and ensuring he recovered in time to return to his duties. While she did not openly discuss her knowledge of his lycanthropy, the fact that she was the one who healed him after each transformation indicates that she had a far greater understanding of his situation than anyone else on staff. It is highly probable that Madame Pomfrey was both compassionate and professional in her handling of Lupin's condition, making sure to maintain the confidentiality of the secret while also ensuring his well-being. This subtle yet vital role she played in Lupin's life speaks volumes about the unspoken trust that existed between the faculty members at Hogwarts. However, perhaps the most surprising revelation is the involvement of Professor Severus Snape. At first glance, Snape might seem like the least likely person to show any understanding or compassion toward Lupin, given their strained relationship. Snape, known for his bitterness and contempt toward many students and faculty members alike, was no stranger to conflict. His history with the Marauders, particularly James Potter, added an additional layer of animosity toward Lupin, one that many believed would prevent him from ever looking at the man with anything other than disdain. But this assumption would be incorrect. Despite their enmity, Snape too had his suspicions about Lupin's condition. As a potions master, he was exceptionally skilled at recognizing the subtle signs of magical maladies and afflictions, and it is likely that he noticed the peculiar behavior of his colleague. Snape was a man who paid close attention to the smallest details and was able to observe patterns that others would miss. It is clear that Snape had suspicions regarding Lupin's condition, though he did not voice them. Instead, he kept his thoughts to himself, perhaps out of a sense of respect for Dumbledore's wishes or a desire to avoid further complicating an already delicate situation. This decision, however, speaks to Snape's character, revealing a side of him that was not simply cruel and vindictive. His choice to stay silent, despite his suspicions, shows a level of restraint and self-control that is often overlooked when considering his complex personality. The relationship between Snape and Lupin was one built on tension and mutual distrust. Their history, particularly during their time as students at Hogwarts, was one fraught with animosity. Snape had never forgiven Lupin and the Marauders for the humiliation they caused him, and Lupin, in turn, could not shake the feeling of resentment towards Snape's bullying behavior. Yet in the adult world, their roles had changed. Lupin, as a professor, had the power to affect Snape's reputation, just as Snape, as potions master, had the power to undermine Lupin's authority. However, despite their mutual dislike, Snape chose not to reveal Lupin's secret, a decision that adds complexity to their already intricate relationship. This quiet understanding between Snape and Lupin is one of the most fascinating aspects of the Marauder era at Hogwarts. It highlights the intricacies of life at the school, where not everything is as it seems, and where secrets are often shared in the shadows. The fact that Snape, a man so steeped in bitterness and hatred, was able to put aside his feelings toward Lupin and maintain the secrecy surrounding his condition is both surprising and telling. It speaks to the unspoken code of silence that many of the professors at Hogwarts adhered to, especially when it came to protecting their colleagues from harm. The deeper implications of this secrecy raise interesting questions about loyalty, trust, and compassion within the walls of Hogwarts. While the students, particularly Harry and his friends, remained blissfully unaware of the true nature of Lupin's condition, the professors at Hogwarts were forced to navigate a delicate balance. They had to maintain the illusion of normalcy for the students while also ensuring that their colleagues were protected. It was a complicated web of lies and truth, with each professor playing a part in maintaining the secret of Lupin's lycanthropy. Lupin's time at Hogwarts, particularly his role as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, was not only shaped by his battle with lycanthropy but also by the trust and support he received from certain members of the faculty. Dumbledore's unwavering belief in him, McGonagall's quiet loyalty, Pomfrey's compassionate care, and even Snape's taciturn understanding all contributed to Lupin's ability to carry out his duties at the school despite the incredible challenges he faced. These subtle yet profound interactions between the faculty members add a layer of depth to the story of the Marauders and their time at Hogwarts, showing that even in a world filled with magic and danger, there are moments of compassion and understanding that make all the difference. Ultimately, the secret of Lupin's lycanthropy is not just about his struggle as a werewolf, but also about the hidden relationships and unspoken bonds that existed within the walls of Hogwarts. It is a testament to the complexity of human nature that despite the difficulties and prejudices that Lupin faced, he was able to find understanding and support among his colleagues, even those who had their own complicated histories and personal grudges. The truth of Lupin's condition, as well as the secrecy surrounding it, is a crucial piece of the larger story of the Marauders, one that remains both intriguing and mysterious. Number 21. What role did Severus Snape play in the Marauders' story? Severus Snape's relationship with the Marauders has always been an intriguing and complex aspect of the Harry Potter series. While he was often portrayed as a hostile figure, especially in his interactions with James Potter and his friends, his role in their story was far more complicated than simple animosity. The truth behind his connection to the Marauders, particularly James Potter, reveals a tale of rivalry, grudging respect, and deep emotional conflict that would shape Snape's character and actions for the rest of his life. From the very first year at Hogwarts, Severus Snape was an easy target for the Marauders' cruel sense of humour. James Potter, the arrogant and popular Gryffindor, along with his friends Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, seemed to take pleasure in tormenting Snape. James, in particular, enjoyed humiliating Snape whenever he could, often mocking him for his awkwardness and perceived inferiority. Snape, for his part, harboured an intense hatred for James Potter, seeing him as a symbol of everything he despised about the Gryffindor house and the wizarding world at large. Yet, as with many stories in the wizarding world, things were not as straightforward as they seemed. The Marauders, though seemingly united in their cruel treatment of Snape, each had their own reasons for their actions. James, for example, was not simply a bully. He was in many ways trying to assert his dominance in a world where he felt the need to prove his worth. The truth, however, was that deep down James was insecure, especially regarding his own feelings of inadequacy. His need to belittle Snape, in part, stemmed from his own issues, a desire to establish his superiority in a world that often challenged him. This animosity between Snape and James came to a head one fateful night when the Marauders, in their 5th year, played a dangerous prank on Snape involving Remus Lupin's monthly transformation into a werewolf. Unaware of the dangers he was about to face, Snape had been lured to the Shrieking Shack by Sirius Black, who knew the truth about Lupin's condition, but failed to warn Snape in time. As Snape made his way into the shack, he was unaware that a full moon was rising and Lupin was about to transform. The situation was set to be deadly for Snape, and it seemed as though Sirius was prepared to let him walk right into his doom. It was James Potter who, in a split second of decision, chose to act heroically. Despite everything that had happened between him and Snape, despite the endless taunts and mockery, James acted to save the very person he had long despised. Realizing the danger Snape was in, James used all his courage and strength to save him from a gruesome fate, pushing him out of harm's way and narrowly avoiding the wrath of Lupin in his werewolf form. In that moment, James risked his life, not only to help a hated rival, but also to do what was right. The consequences of this event were monumental for Severus Snape. The truth about James Potter's actions haunted him for years. For Snape, the memory was a source of bitter conflict. On one hand, he despised James and everything he represented, from the privileged life of the Gryffindor house to the arrogance and popularity that had made him a target of Snape's own disdain. On the other hand, Snape could not erase the undeniable fact that James had, in his moment of need, saved him. It was a kindness that Snape could never fully reconcile with the image of James as the arrogant, cruel bully he had long believed him to be. The emotional fallout from this incident colored Snape's entire future. He could not forgive James for the years of torment, and yet he could not deny the debt he owed him. This paradox would shape Snape's behavior in the years to come, particularly in his relationship with Harry Potter, James's son. Snape's resentment towards Harry was fueled not just by Harry's resemblance to James, but also by the painful reminder that in some way Harry carried with him the legacy of a man who had once saved Snape's life. It is crucial to understand that Snape's bitterness toward James was not simply the product of childish rivalry. It was a deeply rooted emotion tied to Snape's feelings of rejection and humiliation. As a child from a poor, abusive family, Snape had always felt like an outsider in the wizarding world. His complex relationship with Lily Evans, Harry's mother, only added fuel to the fire. Snape had loved Lily, but she had chosen James over him, and this rejection left Snape scarred for life. When he saw James saving him, Snape could not help but feel the sting of that old wound. It reminded him of everything he had lost and the man he had never become, everything that James had. Even more than just the personal rivalry, Snape's relationship with the Marauders and his complicated feelings toward James reflected the broader themes of prejudice and class struggles that permeated the wizarding world. Snape, a half-blood wizard, had long struggled with the feeling that he was inferior in a world dominated by pure-blood families like the Malfoys. The Marauders, especially James, represented the very ideals that Snape rejected: privilege, power, and the belief that blood status determined one's worth. But the truth was, Snape had more in common with the Marauders than he would ever admit. The fact that James had saved him proved that even those he despised were not so different from him in the end. Years later, when Snape became a double agent for Dumbledore during the First and Second Wizarding Wars, his role in the Marauders' story continued to affect him. His secret connection to Lily Potter was another driving force behind his actions. Snape's hatred of Harry was in part an extension of the unresolved emotions he had toward James. But Snape's love for Lily and his deep regret over her death was what ultimately pushed him into the position where he made choices that would forever mark him as both a hero and a villain in the eyes of the wizarding world. In the end, Snape's relationship with the Marauders was a pivotal part of his journey. James Potter, the man he had hated for so long, had saved his life at great personal risk. That moment, when James's true nature was revealed, left Snape forever changed. It was a fact he would never forget, even as he tried to bury it beneath layers of bitterness and hatred. Snape's role in the story of the Marauders was not defined by simple antagonism, but by the emotional complexities of his character, his loyalty to Lily, his resentment toward James, and his tortured love for a world that had never truly accepted him. Ultimately, the truth about Severus Snape's role in the Marauders' history is not just a tale of rivalry, but a lesson in the complexities of human nature. It shows that the lines between good and evil are often blurry, and that the past, no matter how painful, has a profound impact on who we become. Snape's journey is one of redemption, self-sacrifice, and the painful realization that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from those we least expect. Number 22. Sirius and Hagrid's flying motorcycle, a forgotten detail. The enchanted motorbike that Hagrid used to deliver Harry Potter to the Dursleys' doorstep is one of the most iconic images in the Harry Potter series. Its legendary nature is not just tied to its magical properties but to the intriguing backstory of its owner, Sirius Black, and the deep, symbolic role the bike played in his life. Many fans of the series recall the dramatic scene in which Hagrid rides the flying motorcycle, the young Harry safely in his arms, soaring through the night sky. However, the question remains: why did Sirius Black, a wizard who was far more accustomed to luxury than practicality, own such a peculiar means of transport? To understand this, we must delve into Sirius's character, his rebellious nature, and the motorcycle's significance as a symbol of freedom and escape. Sirius Black's life was one of conflict, rebellion, and a constant search for personal freedom. Born into the ancient and wealthy Black family, Sirius was surrounded by a legacy steeped in pure-blood ideology. His family was obsessed with maintaining their bloodline's purity, a concept that weighed heavily on Sirius. Unlike his brother Regulus, who followed in the footsteps of the family's ideals, Sirius despised the narrow views and harsh expectations of his parents. This inner turmoil shaped his character, pushing him toward a life of defiance. His escape from the Black family home at the age of 16 marked a key turning point in his life. Refusing to live by the standards of the family, Sirius sought refuge with his best friend James Potter and later Lily Evans in their home at Godric's Hollow. The motorcycle that Sirius later came to possess was, in many ways, the embodiment of his desire for escape. In an interview, J.K. Rowling explained that Sirius viewed the motorcycle as more than just a mode of transportation. It represented his yearning to break free from the constraints of his family's expectations and the conventional world that sought to confine him. The motorbike gave him a sense of flight, a feeling of liberation, Rowling said. It allowed him to soar above the mundane, to feel free and untethered, much like his personal desire to fly away from his past. For Sirius, the bike symbolized the steep, boundless possibilities of his life outside the Black family's oppressive grip. It was on this very motorcycle that Sirius and James Potter embarked on many adventures together. The two best friends were not only members of the Order of the Phoenix, but also notorious for their love of mischief and thrill-seeking. Together they would often use the bike to travel across Britain, sometimes carrying out dangerous missions for the Order, other times simply enjoying a night out under the stars, far away from the constraints of their roles in society. The bike was a way for Sirius to feel free and alive, in stark contrast to the suffocating environment he had left behind at home. The wind in his hair, the sense of speed, and the freedom of the open road were a sharp contrast to the rigid and controlling lifestyle his family had imposed on him. For James Potter, who had grown up with a great deal of wealth and status, the motorbike represented a similar sense of freedom and adventure. James, much like Sirius, had always been a bit of a daredevil. He had no patience for rules or conventions, especially if they came from authority figures he didn't respect. Riding the motorbike with Sirius was more than just a pastime. It was an act of rebellion, a refusal to be bound by the expectations of their families or the Ministry of Magic. It was this shared sense of adventure and independence that helped solidify the bond between Sirius and James, and the bike became a symbol of their friendship. Over time, the motorbike became something of a legend among the members of the Order of the Phoenix. It was not just a practical tool for transporting people quickly and covertly. It was a symbol of the camaraderie, trust, and rebellion that defined the group's mission. The bike's unique ability to fly, to defy the ordinary, mirrored the ways in which the Order sought to defy the rising tide of darkness brought by Lord Voldemort and his followers. The motorbike became a tangible connection between the members of the Order, reminding them of their purpose and the bonds they shared. As the years passed, the motorbike took on new meaning, especially as it became connected with the fates of Harry Potter and Hagrid. After the tragic deaths of James and Lily Potter at the hands of Voldemort, the motorbike that had once belonged to Sirius was left abandoned but not forgotten. When Hagrid was tasked with delivering baby Harry to the Dursleys' home, it was this very bike that he used. The scene is one that fans remember vividly. Hagrid, a giant of a man with Harry Potter, safely nestled in his arms, flying through the night sky. It is an image of freedom and hope amidst the sorrow and devastation of the Potter family's loss. In that moment, the motorcycle became a symbol of continuity. It was a way for Sirius to remain connected to Harry even after his death. The bike, once a symbol of Sirius's youthful rebellion, now carried the young child who would one day carry on the fight against the darkness that had claimed his parents. The journey from the Potters' home to the Dursleys was not just a physical one, it was a passage of legacy, a transfer of responsibility. And in that moment, the motorcycle was the means by which that legacy was passed on. Hagrid's use of the bike also speaks to the deep connection between the magical and the mundane. Hagrid, a character who straddles both the magical and non-magical worlds, embodies this balance. His role in transporting Harry to the Dursleys highlights the importance of family, loyalty, and sacrifice. For Hagrid, the motorcycle was not just a vehicle, it was a means of carrying out his duty, of protecting Harry and ensuring his survival. In many ways, it mirrored the journey that Harry would take in the coming years, a journey filled with adventure, danger, and discovery. The flying motorcycle also played a role in the larger story of Harry's connection to Sirius. When Harry later discovers that Sirius was his godfather, he learns that the man who had once been his parents' closest friend was now bound to him by blood, duty, and love. Sirius had, in many ways, fulfilled the role of a surrogate parent for Harry. The motorcycle, which had once symbolized Sirius's escape from his past, now became a symbol of his bond with Harry. It was a way for Harry to connect to the man who had risked everything to protect him, a man whose love and loyalty transcended even death. The significance of the motorcycle is not just in its magical properties or its role in transporting Harry, it is in the memories it evokes, the connections it represents, and the legacy it carries. For Sirius, the bike was a symbol of rebellion and escape. For Harry, it became a link to his parents' past and to the love and friendship that had shaped his life. And for Hagrid, it was a symbol of his unwavering loyalty to his friends and his duty to protect those he loved. Together, these elements created a tapestry of meaning that spanned generations, a reminder of the bonds that connect us all, even through the most unlikely of vehicles. In the end, the motorcycle is not just a magical item. It is a symbol of freedom, love, and the unbreakable ties that bind people together. From Sirius's desire to escape the confines of his family to Harry's journey to fulfill his destiny, the motorcycle serves as a reminder of the importance of staying true to oneself and to the relationships that define us. Its legacy, carried on through the generations, continues to remind us that in the world of Harry Potter, even the most unexpected objects can carry with them the weight of history and the promise of hope. Number 23. Could Lily have been the fifth Marauder? In the world of Harry Potter, few friendships are as iconic as that of the Marauders. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew shared a bond that went beyond the typical school years. They were a tight-knit group of friends who ruled Hogwarts with their mischief and pranks. However, there's a lingering question that has piqued the interest of fans for years. Could Lily Evans, the fiery and intelligent Gryffindor who eventually became Harry Potter's mother, have been the fifth Marauder? The truth, as revealed by J.K. Rowling, is more complex than a simple yes or no, but it shows just how intertwined Lily's life was with the Marauders, even if she never officially joined their ranks. Lily Evans was always an integral part of the Marauders' lives, even if she was never one of them in the traditional sense. James Potter, who would go on to marry Lily, was the very embodiment of the Marauder spirit, bold, clever, and often reckless. It was this reckless streak, especially in his youth, that kept him in constant trouble. But Lily, with her grounded, intelligent, and compassionate nature, was the counterbalance James needed. She was, in many ways, the moral compass of their group, the one who could see through the bravado and excesses of James and Sirius, grounding them when their pranks and mischief went too far. It's clear that Lily's influence on James, particularly in his formative years, was far greater than most fans realize. One of the most fascinating aspects of Lily's relationship with the Marauders is how she was a part of their lives without necessarily participating in their antics. While the Marauders were known for their pranks and their youthful disregard for authority, Lily kept her distance, not out of disdain, but because she saw things differently. She was the one who could see the flaws in their schemes and act as the voice of reason, stepping in when things got too out of hand. It's easy to imagine that had things unfolded differently, Lily could have easily found herself alongside James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, participating in their escapades and their bond of friendship. Lily's role in the Marauder group is perhaps most clearly illustrated by her relationship with James. It's well known that James had an unrequited crush on Lily during their early years at Hogwarts. James's impulsive behavior, his need to prove himself, was likely in part driven by his desire to impress Lily. However, she was initially unimpressed by his antics, and it took time for James to mature and evolve. By the time he and Lily became a couple, their relationship had deepened, and James was no longer the arrogant boy he once was. Lily's influence on him helped shape his character, guiding him toward a more thoughtful and considerate version of himself. In this way, she played a key role in helping the Marauders evolve, especially James. The bond between Lily and Remus Lupin is also telling. Lupin, the kind and empathetic Marauder who struggled with the curse of lycanthropy, spoke of Lily with great warmth and admiration. In contrast to the more boisterous personalities of James and Sirius, Remus was more reserved, and his words about Lily reflected a deep respect for her intelligence and her kindness. He often spoke of her as someone who had been an important part of their lives, someone who had made the Marauder group more complete, even without being an active participant in their mischief. For Remus, Lily was more than just James's love interest. She was a close friend, someone whose presence in their lives brought balance and light. It's also important to consider Lily's relationship with Sirius Black, another key member of the Marauders. Sirius, known for his rebellious nature and sharp wit, was someone who appreciated Lily's no-nonsense attitude. While Sirius often found himself caught up in the Marauders' pranks and adventures, Lily's more straightforward, serious nature grounded him. She was someone he could count on to see through his bravado and challenge him when necessary. In many ways, Lily and Sirius had a mutual respect for each other's strengths, with Lily's intellect and insight complementing Sirius's daring and courageous spirit. Peter Pettigrew, the least notable of the Marauders, was likely less of an influence on Lily. However, there is no denying that she was aware of the dynamics of the group, including his role in their friendship. Given Lily's sharp intelligence, she would have seen through Pettigrew's insecurities and vulnerabilities, and while their relationship may not have been as close as with the other Marauders, it is clear that she recognized the bonds they shared. The dynamic of the Marauders was not only shaped by their shared experiences, but also by the individual relationships they had with those outside their group. Lily Evans, while never a formal member of the Marauders, had a unique place within their circle. She was the glue that kept them grounded, the one who made sure they didn't lose sight of what was important. It's easy to imagine that had Lily's life taken a different turn, she could have been the fifth Marauder, a member of their legendary group of pranksters and adventurers. However, life had other plans for her, and her path diverged from theirs in a way that solidified her as a strong, independent woman in her own right. Had Lily joined the Marauders in their youthful escapades, she would have undoubtedly added a different dimension to their pranks. While the Marauders were known for their wild and often dangerous antics, Lily's presence would have made their activities more thoughtful, more carefully planned, and possibly even more successful. Her sharp mind and ability to think on her feet would have made her a formidable member of their group. She would have kept them out of trouble when things got too serious and ensured that their pranks remained light-hearted rather than crossing into dangerous territory. It's easy to see her as the one who would rein in James and Sirius when they pushed too far, while still sharing in their sense of fun and adventure. Lily's absence from the Marauder group also speaks volumes about her personal values. She was not someone who could be easily swept up in the carefree, often reckless nature of the Marauders. She had a strong moral compass and an ability to see the bigger picture, which likely kept her from becoming too entangled in their mischief. While her relationship with James was deeply affectionate and supportive, Lily was not a follower, she was an equal partner. It is likely that Lily, had she chosen to join the Marauders, would have been the one to introduce a sense of responsibility and ethics into their activities, adding a layer of depth to their adventures that they otherwise lacked. While Lily's role in the Marauders' lives was often subtle, her influence was undeniable. Her intellect, kindness, and strength of character made her an invaluable part of their group, even if she was never officially a member. It's clear from her interactions with each of the Marauders that she was someone who shaped their lives in significant ways. She was the voice of reason that tempered their more reckless impulses, and the friend who was always there to support them, even when she wasn't part of their pranks. In many ways, Lily Evans was the missing fifth Marauder, the one whose wisdom and heart helped shape the Marauder legacy. The idea of Lily Evans as the fifth Marauder is a powerful one because it emphasizes the role of friendship, influence, and balance in the lives of the characters we love. Her presence in the Marauder story shows us that sometimes the most important members of a group are the ones who are not always in the spotlight, the ones who shape the lives of their friends without ever needing to be the loudest or the most visible. Lily Evans may not have been a marauder in the traditional sense, but her impact on their lives was immeasurable. Number 24, why James's parents had him so late in life. James Potter's parents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, were well-established figures in the wizarding world, admired for their wealth, reputation, and significant contributions to magical society. However, their decision to have a child later in life has long intrigued fans of the Harry Potter series, raising questions about why such a prosperous and respected couple waited until their advanced years to become parents. The story behind James's birth and the circumstances surrounding his parents' long struggle to conceive provide a poignant glimpse into the deeper layers of the Potter family history. Fleamont and Euphemia had everything a couple could desire: wealth, social standing, and magical expertise, but there was one thing they longed for that remained just out of reach: a child. For years, the couple faced the heartbreaking reality of infertility. Despite their best efforts, Euphemia could not conceive, and this issue weighed heavily on their hearts. It wasn't a matter of not wanting a child, it was the painful absence of the one thing that could complete their lives. Their desire to have a family was strong, but the odds seemed stacked against them. The Potters were not alone in their grief. Many wizarding couples faced similar difficulties, but few were as vocal about their struggles. The Potters, despite their societal status, kept their personal heartbreak largely to themselves, never publicly voicing the pain of childlessness. Over time, as the years passed, the couple came to terms with the idea that perhaps they would not be parents after all. Their life together, while full of joy, would remain childless, and they quietly accepted this fate. The turning point came when Fleamont and Euphemia were older, well past the age when most wizards and witches had their children. At this point, the Potters had nearly resigned themselves to a life without heirs, when, quite unexpectedly, Euphemia found herself pregnant. The news was nothing short of miraculous, a sudden and unexpected blessing that changed the course of their lives forever. Fleamont and Euphemia were overjoyed, but the joy was tinged with a sense of wonder, as if they could scarcely believe that something so precious had finally come into their lives. The couple, who had already experienced a fair share of disappointment, now found themselves filled with overwhelming gratitude. James Potter's birth was a miracle, and this miraculous event shaped the way he was raised. From the moment he was born, James was surrounded by an outpouring of love and affection. His parents, who had longed for him for so many years, doted on him with a passion that was rare even among the wealthiest families in the wizarding world. They lavished him with attention, gifts, and praise, eager to make up for the years of waiting. James grew up in an environment where he was constantly reminded of how special he was, not only because he was their long-awaited child, but because he was the product of their deepest hopes and dreams. This abundance of love and care led James to develop a personality that reflected the privileges of his upbringing. He was confident, brash, and somewhat reckless, traits that were undoubtedly influenced by the adoration he received from his parents. It was clear that James had never been in want, whether it was attention, material possessions, or approval. He was the center of his parents' universe, and this attention likely contributed to some of his early arrogance. However, it wasn't all spoiling. Fleamont and Euphemia ensured that their son received a strong education, both in magic and in life. As James grew, his personality began to reflect his extraordinary upbringing. He was not a spoiled child in the sense that he lacked discipline or was entirely self-centered. Instead, James's character seemed to have been shaped by a need to prove himself, a drive that may have stemmed from the immense pressure of being the son of such successful parents. James's charisma and charm were matched only by his desire for adventure and his tendency to seek the approval of his peers. He was not just an ordinary child of privilege. He was a boy who understood the weight of expectation placed upon him. His relationship with his parents remained strong throughout his childhood, and while he grew to be a mischievous and daring young man, it was clear that Fleamont and Euphemia had instilled in him a sense of responsibility. The Potters, despite doting on their son, ensured that he understood the importance of kindness, humility, and respect for others, even though these traits might not have always been immediately apparent to those around him. James was a young man of contradictions, brave, yet occasionally reckless, loyal, but often caught up in the competitive nature of his peer group. The story of James's parenthood provides further insight into the complexities of his character. James was not a product of mere indulgence. His parents, though they gave him everything, also gave him boundaries and expectations. In many ways, his parents' late arrival into parenthood created a dynamic in which James was not just a child, but a symbol of hope and renewal. They saw in him the realization of a dream long deferred, and their efforts to raise him in a loving, albeit sometimes overly protective, environment had a lasting impact on his character. In the magical world, James's family name carried weight, and his parents' wealth afforded him privileges that many others could only dream of. Yet it was not simply these outward signs of success that defined James Potter. The relationship he shared with his parents provided him with a sense of security and purpose. Despite his occasional arrogance and tendency to act out, James was deeply loyal to those he loved and cared for. This loyalty, perhaps fostered by his parents' unconditional love, would later manifest in his unwavering dedication to his friends and in his deep love for Lily Evans, whom he would eventually marry. Fleamont and Euphemia Potter's delayed parenthood also had a profound impact on the way they viewed their son's future. They knew that they had little time to prepare James for the world that awaited him. They had grown up in an era where the wizarding world was on the brink of significant change, with the rise of Voldemort's power threatening to disrupt everything. They understood the dangers that lurked outside their protective bubble, and as a result, they sought to equip James with the skills and knowledge he would need to survive in such a volatile environment. James was not simply raised to be a well-adjusted young man. He was raised to be a fighter, someone who could face the trials and tribulations that would inevitably come his way. As we look back at James Potter's life, it becomes clear that the circumstances of his birth shaped who he became. The delayed arrival of his parents' child, the miracle of his birth, and the deep, unconditional love he received all contributed to James's complex personality. It was a combination of privilege and pressure, love and expectation that forged James into the young man we come to know in the Harry Potter series. His parents' late parenthood was not just a personal story of triumph over adversity. It was a reflection of the broader themes in the wizarding world. The Potters were a family who defied the odds, overcoming personal struggles to create something beautiful. James's life, while marked by both light and dark moments, serves as a testament to the power of love, the strength of family, and the unexpected twists of fate that can change the course of one's life. Number 25. How Harry learned the real names behind the map. The revelation of the Marauders' true identities is a pivotal moment in the Harry Potter series, and in particular, in The Prisoner of Azkaban. In the movies, this moment was somewhat glossed over, leaving viewers without the full depth of the discovery that Harry Potter, along with his friends, made in the Shrieking Shack. It was here, in the eerie setting of the shack, that Harry learned the truth about the creators of the Marauders map, the magical map that had once been in his possession, showing the layout of Hogwarts and the movements of everyone within it. Yet the story behind the Marauders was far more complex and personal than Harry had ever imagined. The Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, had created the map when they were students at Hogwarts. These 4 boys, who were later known for their varying roles in the wizarding world, had left their mark on the school not just with their pranks and adventures, but with the map that continued to play an important part in Harry's life. However, Harry's understanding of them had always been limited. For much of his early life, the Marauders were only names he had heard in passing, vague figures whose legacy seemed largely confined to the magical map they had created. What Harry didn't know, however, was that these figures were far more closely tied to his own past than he could have ever imagined. Harry first encountered the Marauders' map in The Prisoner of Azkaban when Fred and George Weasley handed it over to him. Initially, it was nothing more than a mysterious and clever piece of magical equipment, a means to sneak around the school undetected. But when Harry finally figured out how to use it, he realized it was far more powerful and personal than he'd ever imagined. The map, enchanted with the names of every person at Hogwarts, was a tool created by 4 boys who had once been students at the very school he attended. But Harry never knew the full story behind it, who the creators were and why they had made it. The truth came to light when Harry, Hermione, and Ron were in the Shrieking Shack, alongside the truth about the supposed murderer, Sirius Black. It was here, in the midst of tension and confusion, that Harry first heard Remus Lupin speak about the Marauders' past. Lupin, who had been Harry's defense against the dark arts teacher and had seemed kind, dependable, and wise, revealed a shocking truth. He had been one of the Marauders, along with Sirius, James, and Peter. He had been a creator of the map. The shock was overwhelming for Harry. Not only had Lupin been one of the people who made the map, but he had also been close to his father, James Potter, whom Harry had never truly known. This connection to his father, which had always felt distant and elusive, suddenly became real and tangible. The moment was further complicated when Sirius Black entered the picture. Harry had believed for years that Sirius was a villain, a man who had betrayed his parents to Lord Voldemort, leading to their deaths. Yet in that moment, in the Shrieking Shack, Sirius revealed that he was in fact innocent. He had not betrayed Harry's parents, but had been framed by none other than Peter Pettigrew, another member of the Marauders. For Harry, the realization was earth-shattering. The image he had held of Sirius as a cold-blooded killer began to crumble, replaced with the painful understanding that his godfather had been wronged by everyone around him. In the midst of this revelation, Harry learned that James Potter, his father, had been one of the 4 Marauders. The boy who had been a prankster and a troublemaker at Hogwarts had been the same man who had later sacrificed his life to protect Harry from Voldemort. This duality of his father, a hero and a troublemaker, struck Harry in a way he hadn't expected. It made him reconsider everything he had known about his parents and how he had been raised by his aunt and uncle. Harry had always longed for a connection to his family, but this new knowledge brought with it the understanding that the people he admired, his father and mother, had once been young and full of flaws, just as he and his friends were now. For Harry, the revelation that Sirius and Lupin had been close to his parents was a key moment in his journey. It was not just about learning the truth of the Marauders, but about understanding the deep emotional connection they had shared with his family. Harry had always felt the absence of his parents keenly, but now he was beginning to understand them as real people, with their own friendships, flaws, and adventures. The Marauders' story became intertwined with Harry's own, as he realized that the choices his father and his friends had made at Hogwarts had shaped the world he had inherited. The story of the Marauders also deepened Harry's understanding of loyalty, trust, and friendship. The bond between Sirius, James, Remus, and Peter was one of deep affection and mutual respect. They had been a team, working together to create the Marauders map and ensuring it remained a secret, even after they left Hogwarts. This camaraderie, however, was marred by betrayal. Peter Pettigrew, who had been one of the closest members of their group, had turned his back on his friends. He had sold out Harry's parents to Voldemort, leading to their deaths and Sirius's imprisonment. The contrast between the close bond of the Marauders and the betrayal of one of their own left Harry deeply conflicted. He found himself questioning the nature of loyalty and whether such friendships could ever truly be trusted. The impact of this discovery on Harry's emotional journey cannot be overstated. For much of his life, Harry had felt isolated, with little understanding of who his parents had been and how they had shaped the world he lived in. Now, with the revelation of the Marauders' story, he was finally able to piece together parts of their lives and connect with them in a way he had never been able to before. The knowledge that his father had been a mischievous, daring young man like himself gave Harry a new sense of pride and connection. For the first time, he could see the humanity of his parents, and it made him feel closer to them than ever before. This revelation also shifted Harry's relationship with Lupin and Sirius. Before learning the truth, Harry had only known them as teachers and allies, but now he understood them as people who had been deeply connected to his family. It made him see them in a new light, recognizing that they too had suffered losses and betrayals. The emotional weight of this moment was profound, as Harry grappled with the reality that the people he had once seen as distant figures were, in fact, closely intertwined with the legacy of his parents. In the end, the truth about the Marauders was not just about the map or their adventures at Hogwarts. It was about the emotional connections that bound Harry to them, and the way those bonds helped him understand himself and his family. By uncovering the true identities of the Marauders, Harry was able to gain a deeper understanding of the people he had admired from a distance, and in doing so, he began to heal the emotional wounds of his past, finding connections to those he had lost and those he had yet to truly understand. Number 26. Sirius almost ended up in Slytherin. Sirius Black, one of the most beloved characters in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, is often remembered for his bravery, loyalty, and strong sense of justice. Fans of the series have long viewed him as the epitome of a Gryffindor, a house known for its courage and daring. However, what many may not realize is that Sirius Black's path to Gryffindor was not as straightforward as it might seem. In fact, the Sorting Hat originally considered placing him in Slytherin, a house whose values stand in stark contrast to everything Sirius believed in. This intriguing possibility unveils a fascinating aspect of his character that is often overlooked. Sirius's family history was deeply entwined with Slytherin values, rooted in blood purity, arrogance, and an overwhelming belief in the superiority of wizard kind over muggles. The Black family was notorious for its unwavering loyalty to these traditions. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius confesses to Harry that when the Sorting Hat was placed on his head, it initially wanted to send him to Slytherin. This revelation is startling, especially considering the vivid contrast between the proud and rebellious Gryffindor Sirius that fans know and love and the more insidious values of Slytherin House. But there was more at play than mere bloodlines in this moment of decision. From the very beginning, Sirius demonstrated a fierce rejection of his family's beliefs. Born into the Black family, which was notorious for its dark history and obsession with pure-blood status, he was expected to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, supporting Voldemort's rise to power and sharing in the conviction that Muggle-borns were inferior. However, Sirius was nothing like the rest of his family. He was passionate, headstrong, and unwilling to accept the bigoted ideals that had been imposed upon him. He refused to conform to his family's expectations, and this sense of rebellion set him apart not only from his relatives, but also from the traits commonly associated with Slytherin. The Sorting Hat's consideration of placing him in Slytherin speaks volumes about Sirius's potential for greatness, but it also highlights a key internal conflict that shaped his identity. The Hat recognized his intelligence and ambition, traits that Slytherin valued highly, but it also noted his deep-rooted desire to reject his family's narrow-minded values. Sirius's powerful urge to distance himself from his upbringing played a significant role in the Hat's final decision. As he recalls to Harry, he adamantly told the Sorting Hat, "I don't care where you put me, as long as it's not Slytherin." This moment of clarity was pivotal in Sirius's life, for it marked his decision to forge his own path, one that was in direct opposition to the ideals of his parents and his heritage. It is crucial to recognize that Sirius's willingness to choose Gryffindor was not based solely on convenience or the easy option. In fact, by choosing Gryffindor, he was aligning himself with a house known for its valor and idealism, not ambition and cunning. While Slytherin valued power, resourcefulness, and a certain level of ruthlessness, Gryffindor championed qualities such as bravery, chivalry, and a sense of justice. These were values that Sirius would later exemplify throughout his life. His choice to become a Gryffindor was an active rejection of the familial pressure to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors and embrace a world of prejudice and hatred. But Sirius's choice to stand apart from his family and refuse to accept Slytherin's call was not an easy one. His decision would have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for those around him. He would find himself isolated from the very family that should have been his support system. His mother, Walburga Black, was a fierce advocate for the pure-blood cause, and her contempt for his decision to abandon their values was evident in the way she disowned him. The Black family tapestry, which hung proudly in their ancestral home, bore the names of each family member, with stars marking those who had fallen from the family's ideals. When Sirius chose to defy his heritage, his name was removed from the tapestry, symbolizing his permanent estrangement from his bloodline. In the world of Hogwarts, however, Sirius found a new family, a group of friends who would become known as the Marauders. This friendship was crucial in shaping Sirius's identity, and it was with these friends, James Potter, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, that he truly began to embrace the values of Gryffindor. Together, the Marauders created the infamous Marauders Map, a symbol of their rebellious spirit and their determination to defy authority and make their own rules. The bond between Sirius and his friends was unbreakable, and they proved that family could be chosen, not just inherited. It was in this group that Sirius truly found a sense of belonging and purpose, one that was entirely separate from the narrow confines of his birthright. Sirius's rejection of Slytherin also had a profound impact on his later choices, especially his involvement in the First Wizarding War. Despite his family's alliance with Voldemort, Sirius was one of the key members of the Order of the Phoenix, fighting for the defeat of the Dark Lord and standing up for those who were oppressed by the tyrant. His unwavering commitment to justice and his willingness to risk everything for the greater good are qualities that were deeply influenced by his time in Gryffindor. He proved time and again that he was not just brave in the traditional sense, but courageous in his ability to fight for what he believed in, no matter the personal cost. Sirius's decision to reject Slytherin and embrace Gryffindor also had a lasting impact on the next generation, particularly on Harry Potter. As Harry's godfather, Sirius became a guiding figure in his life, offering the kind of support and mentorship that Harry had never known before. Sirius became a father figure to Harry, showing him the importance of loyalty, courage, and standing up for what was right. And just as Sirius had once defied his family's oppressive traditions, he encouraged Harry to make his own choices, to fight for justice, and to never back down in the face of adversity. Sirius's legacy as a Gryffindor was not just about the house he belonged to, but about the choices he made and the example he set. While it is easy to view Sirius as the quintessential Gryffindor, his near placement in Slytherin serves as a reminder that identity is not solely determined by one's house or heritage. Sirius's story is a powerful example of how individuals can shape their own destinies, defying the expectations that society and family place upon them. His choice to reject Slytherin was not just about avoiding a particular house, it was about embracing a new way of thinking, a new set of values that were in direct opposition to everything his family stood for. It was this decision that ultimately allowed Sirius to become the person he was, a brave, loyal, and fiercely independent man who would go on to inspire generations of witches and wizards. In the end, Sirius Black's journey is a testament to the power of choice and the importance of following one's convictions. While the Sorting Hat may have seen Slytherin's potential in him, it was his desire to distance himself from the darkness of his family's past that led him to Gryffindor. His life is a reminder that courage is not just about fighting battles, but about choosing the right path, even when it means going against everything that is expected of you. And in the case of Sirius Black, that path was not just one of bravery, it was one of defiance, independence, and an unyielding belief in the power of good. Number 27. Why Pettigrew betrayed his friends. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal is one of the darkest and most tragic moments in the history of the Marauders. This act of treason, which shattered the lives of his three closest friends, has puzzled readers and fans for years. Why would someone who had been trusted and cherished by his companions turn on them in such a cruel and heartless manner? To understand this betrayal, we must explore the nature of Pettigrew's character and his fears, which ultimately drove him to make a decision that would alter the course of wizarding history. Peter Pettigrew was not always the cowardly traitor he is remembered as. He was once a part of the Marauders, a group of 4 Hogwarts students, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, who shared a bond that seemed unbreakable. Together they created the Marauders map, engaged in countless pranks, and supported each other through thick and thin. It was within this group that Peter found a sense of belonging, something he had likely never experienced before. For a young boy who had been overlooked and underestimated by many, the Marauders represented a family of sorts, a place where he could finally feel important and valued. However, despite his outward appearances, Peter harbored deep insecurities. He was the smallest and weakest of the Marauders, often overshadowed by the more charismatic and talented James and Sirius. His lack of confidence and his tendency to avoid confrontation made him a passive participant in the group's activities. His role in the Marauders' pranks was often less prominent, and he was more of a follower than a leader. This insecurity was something that would haunt him for the rest of his life, and it ultimately contributed to the disastrous choice he would later make. As the Second Wizarding War began to take shape, the Marauders found themselves divided by the growing conflict between the forces of Voldemort and those of the Order of the Phoenix. While James, Sirius, and Remus joined the Order and fought bravely against Voldemort's forces, Peter's feelings of fear and inadequacy began to take hold of him. He feared for his own life, and, unlike his friends, he could not see a future where the Order of the Phoenix would succeed. His deep-rooted cowardice led him to believe that the only way to ensure his survival was to align himself with the Dark Lord. Peter's betrayal was not a moment of spontaneous decision-making. It was the culmination of his fears and insecurities, coupled with a desperate desire to be protected. In his mind, aligning himself with Voldemort, who at the time was at the peak of his power, would guarantee him safety. He knew that Voldemort would demand loyalty, but Peter was willing to give that loyalty in exchange for the promise of survival. It was a calculation driven by self-preservation, but one that disregarded the bonds of friendship and loyalty that had once defined his life. In the end, Peter Pettigrew's decision to betray his friends was rooted in his profound fear of death and his desperate need to secure a place for himself in a world that was increasingly unstable and dangerous. His cowardice led him to make a fateful choice. He would reveal the location of the Potters, ensuring their deaths at the hands of Voldemort. He knew that James and Lily Potter, along with their son Harry, were protected by the Fidelius Charm, a spell that hid their location from Voldemort and his followers. As the Potters' secret keeper, it was Peter's responsibility to keep their location safe. Instead, he chose to divulge their whereabouts to the Dark Lord, leading to the deaths of his once loyal friends and ultimately setting the stage for the rise of Harry Potter as the boy who lived. The consequences of this betrayal were far-reaching and devastating. The Potters' deaths shattered the wizarding world and left Harry Potter an orphan. But the impact on the Marauders' friendship was even more profound. Sirius, James's best friend and Peter's close companion, was devastated by the betrayal. He was the one who had trusted Peter the most, believing him to be as loyal as the rest of the group. For years, Sirius carried the weight of Peter's treachery, wrongly imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit while Peter remained hidden, living a life of lies. Peter's betrayal also led to the collapse of the Marauders' bond. Remus Lupin, who had shared a deep friendship with Peter, was left to wrestle with the painful realization that the person he had considered a brother had turned against him in the most unimaginable way. The hurt and anger felt by the remaining Marauders were compounded by the sense of betrayal that never truly healed. Their trust in each other had been broken, and it left scars that would never fade. What is perhaps most tragic about Peter's betrayal is the fact that despite everything, he was never truly rewarded for his actions. While Voldemort promised him protection and power, Peter ultimately became nothing more than a pawn in the Dark Lord's game. His fear and desperation led him to make choices that were not his own, but rather dictated by Voldemort's manipulation. In the end, Peter found himself in the service of a master who would never see him as anything more than a tool to further his own agenda. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal is a reminder of the destructive power of fear and insecurity. His inability to believe in his own worth, his cowardice, and his desperate desire for survival led him down a path of destruction that ruined the lives of those who had once loved and trusted him. While his actions are unforgivable, they serve as a cautionary tale of how the fear of death and the desire for protection can lead even the most loyal of individuals to make choices that will haunt them forever. The tragedy of Peter's betrayal is further compounded by the fact that it was not a singular act. It was a pattern of behavior that defined his life. From his decision to align himself with Voldemort, to his willingness to live a life of lies and deceit, Peter never truly learned to stand up for what was right. His need for protection and his fear of facing the consequences of his actions led him to make choices that were ultimately hollow, leaving him with nothing but the shame of his betrayal. In the end, Peter Pettigrew is remembered not for his moments of bravery or loyalty, but for his cowardice and his role in the destruction of the lives of those who cared for him. His betrayal is a painful chapter in the story of the Marauders, a chapter that could never be fully erased or forgiven. It serves as a reminder that true loyalty comes not from fear, but from the strength to stand by those you love, even in the face of danger. Number 28. The Marauders' role in the First Wizarding War. In the wizarding world, few groups left a mark as indelible as the Marauders: James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. These four young men, whose mischievous exploits at Hogwarts were legendary, would later become key figures in the First Wizarding War, fighting against the dark forces of Lord Voldemort. Their contributions were pivotal, though not without complexities and contradictions. The transformation of the Marauders from schoolyard troublemakers to brave warriors is a testament to the duality of their characters, both youthful and rebellious, yet deeply committed to the cause of defeating the dark wizardry that threatened their world. James Potter, the leader of the Marauders, grew from a reckless, arrogant student into a fearless and selfless member of the Order of the Phoenix. In his youth, he was known for his popularity, his skill on the Quidditch pitch, and his rivalry with Severus Snape. However, when the First Wizarding War erupted, James set aside his carefree days to join the fight. His bravery during the war earned him a place among the most respected members of the Order. As one of the most capable fighters, James was often at the forefront of dangerous missions. His expertise in combat, combined with his natural leadership abilities, made him indispensable. He was a protector, not just for his friends, but for the wizarding world as a whole, determined to take down Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Sirius Black, James's closest friend, was another crucial figure in the Order's resistance. Known for his rebellious streak even as a student, Sirius had been one of the Marauders who relentlessly pushed against authority and social norms. However, when the threat of Voldemort became all too real, Sirius transformed into a formidable warrior. He was notorious for his daring and sometimes reckless style of fighting, but it was his loyalty that defined his role in the war. Sirius's fearlessness and unyielding commitment to the cause made him a powerful ally. His skills in combat were matched only by his quick thinking and adaptability in dire situations. Sirius often carried out dangerous missions alongside James, taking on missions that required bravery and skill. Their bond of friendship and mutual respect extended beyond the walls of Hogwarts, becoming a force for good in the darkest of times. However, the most complex of the Marauders was Remus Lupin. Born with the curse of lycanthropy, Remus's condition made him a figure of isolation, both in his youth and as an adult. His struggle with being a werewolf was something that weighed heavily on him throughout his life. But in the face of the First Wizarding War, Remus proved to be a crucial asset to the Order, despite the challenges of his condition. As a werewolf, he had unique abilities that allowed him to track and sense danger in ways that others could not. His sensitivity to the world around him and his careful nature made him an excellent strategist and a valued member of the Order. He took on roles that required subtlety and discretion, often acting as a spy, gathering intelligence on Voldemort's plans. His quiet determination and willingness to sacrifice his own well-being for the greater good were traits that earned him the respect of his fellow fighters. Then there was Peter Pettigrew, whose contribution to the war was, at best, passive and, at worst, treacherous. Unlike James, Sirius and Remus, Peter lacked the bravery and conviction to fight against Voldemort in the way that his friends did. His role in the First Wizarding War was largely ceremonial, as he was seen as the weak link in the Marauder group. His timidity and self-preservation instincts made him ill-suited for the rigors of the war. Despite his lack of true valor, Peter played a crucial role in the war's tragic outcome. His betrayal of James and Lily Potter led directly to their deaths and ultimately to the rise of Voldemort's return. Peter's weakness and fear of standing up for what was right were the very traits that made him susceptible to Voldemort's manipulation. His actions during the war cast a dark shadow over the legacy of the Marauders, as his betrayal shattered the trust that had once bound the group together. The First Wizarding War was a time of extraordinary bravery, and the Marauders' involvement was a testament to the extraordinary nature of their bonds, even though they were ultimately tested in ways they could not have anticipated. The contributions of James, Sirius and Remus were profound. They fought fiercely for the Order, risking their lives in combat and working tirelessly behind the scenes to protect the wizarding world. They were loyal, brave and selfless, traits that defined their role in the war. But Peter Pettigrew's betrayal marked the end of their collective heroism, exposing the vulnerabilities that lay beneath the surface of their seemingly invincible group. The Marauders' ability to transform into animagi was not just a means of mischief, but a vital tool in their war efforts. As animagi, they could move freely without detection, making them invaluable assets for the Order in their covert operations. Sirius, with his ability to transform into a large black dog, was able to serve as a protector and tracker, while James, who transformed into a stag, was able to fight with speed and agility. Remus, though constrained by his lycanthropy, found solace in the bond of his friends, who made sure that he was never alone in his struggles. Their transformations allowed them to execute missions that were both dangerous and vital to the war effort, helping to dismantle Voldemort's forces one step at a time. Despite their differing roles, the Marauders shared an unbreakable bond. Their experiences at Hogwarts, though full of mischief and youthful rebellion, shaped the way they would face the horrors of the war. The Marauders' map, an iconic creation of their time at school, later proved to be a useful tool during the war. It allowed the Order of the Phoenix to navigate the most dangerous situations, avoiding traps set by Death Eaters and gathering crucial information. It was a small but significant way in which the legacy of the Marauders continued to aid those fighting against the dark forces. Yet despite all the heroism, the ultimate tragedy of the Marauders lies in their fates. James and Lily Potter were murdered by Voldemort in 1981, leaving their son Harry as the only survivor. Sirius Black, wrongly imprisoned for crimes he did not commit, spent 12 years in Azkaban before escaping to rejoin the fight. Remus Lupin, forever scarred by his condition, continued to fight until his own death in the Second Wizarding War. And Peter Pettigrew, whose cowardice and treachery led to the deaths of his friends, eventually died in a way that reflected his spineless nature, an ironic and fitting end for a man who had betrayed those who trusted him. Though their story ended in tragedy, the Marauders' impact on the war was undeniable. They fought with everything they had, not just for their own lives but for the future of the wizarding world. Their courage, though marred by Peter's betrayal, left an enduring legacy in the fight against Voldemort. It was their spirit, rebellious, loyal, and courageous, that carried the fight forward even after their deaths. The sacrifices of the Marauders proved that heroism is not defined by perfection, but by the courage to stand up in the face of unimaginable darkness. Number 29. Why Dumbledore didn't entrust Sirius with the Fidelius charm. In the world of Harry Potter, the Marauders are revered for their bravery and cleverness, and among them, Sirius Black stands as one of the most intriguing characters. His friendship with James Potter, his loyalty to the Order of the Phoenix, and his tragic fate all serve to shape his story. Yet one of the most puzzling aspects of Sirius's life revolves around a decision made long before his escape from Azkaban, a decision that ultimately contributed to the fall of his best friend and the deaths of James and Lily Potter. The question remains, why didn't Albus Dumbledore entrust the Potter's secret to Sirius? The answer lies in a crucial moment of mistrust and a decision made by Sirius himself, which would prove to be catastrophic. As the Wizarding War reached its peak, Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his time, was responsible for making strategic decisions that would safeguard those who were vulnerable. One of his most important tasks was ensuring the safety of Harry Potter, the child destined to vanquish Lord Voldemort. In order to protect Harry, Dumbledore needed to decide who would become the secret keeper for the Potter's location. The role of the secret keeper was crucial, as it would ensure that only those chosen knew where the Potters were hiding, keeping their whereabouts hidden from Voldemort and his Death Eaters. At first, Dumbledore believed that Sirius Black, James's best friend and a man he trusted deeply, would be the most obvious choice. Sirius was, after all, fiercely loyal to James and Lily, and his position as godfather to Harry made him a natural guardian for their secret. However, as Dumbledore and the Potters discussed the matter, something unexpected happened. Sirius, whose heart was undoubtedly in the right place, began to voice concerns. He knew better than anyone that Voldemort would undoubtedly turn his attention to him first, considering his close ties with the Potters. The Dark Lord's cunning mind would no doubt make Sirius the first suspect if the secret were entrusted to him. In a moment of self-doubt and concern for the safety of his friends, Sirius made an unprecedented suggestion. He proposed that they choose someone else to be the secret keeper. It's important to understand that this decision was not one made lightly. In fact, Sirius's suggestion was rooted in a deep sense of protection for the Potters. By giving up the position of secret keeper, Sirius believed he could divert Voldemort's attention away from himself, potentially saving his friends. And so, with great reluctance, he put forward the name of Peter Pettigrew, a fellow marauder and friend of James and Lily. Despite the fact that Pettigrew had always been the least conspicuous of their group, Sirius felt that with his unassuming nature, he could be the perfect decoy to draw attention away from the real target. It's easy to see how this decision would have shaken Dumbledore, who had long seen Sirius as a person of great trust. Yet, in his wisdom, Dumbledore chose not to intervene. He respected the wishes of James and Lily, who both agreed with the suggestion, as they too were worried about the danger of Voldemort suspecting Sirius. After all, they were living under constant threat, and any measure that could provide even a small amount of protection was worth considering. Therefore, Peter Pettigrew was chosen as the secret keeper, and Dumbledore, ever the observer, accepted their decision, believing it to be the best course of action. However, as the story unfolded, the consequences of this choice became tragically clear. The Potters, under the false security of Pettigrew's role as secret keeper, were ultimately betrayed. On Halloween night, Voldemort arrived at the Potters' home, and the unthinkable happened. The seemingly unassuming Pettigrew, who had once been a trusted friend, turned on them. He revealed the Potters' location to Voldemort, and in the end, it was he who caused their deaths. As we learn in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Pettigrew framed Sirius for the crime, fleeing into hiding while leaving behind only a trail of destruction. The betrayal was not just a personal tragedy for Sirius, but a heavy blow to the wizarding world. The Potters were dead, and with them the only hope of defeating Voldemort seemed to fade. Harry, the boy who lived, was left in the care of the Dursleys, unaware of the immense weight that rested on his tiny shoulders. Sirius, on the other hand, found himself cast out from the wizarding community, falsely accused of a crime he did not commit. It wasn't until years later, when Harry came to Hogwarts, that Sirius would begin his long and painful journey to uncover the truth. Looking back, it's easy to speculate about what might have happened if Dumbledore had insisted that Sirius be the secret keeper instead of Peter. Would the Potters have survived the attack? Would Voldemort have been defeated sooner? The questions are endless, and the answer will never be known. But one thing is certain. The decision to trust Pettigrew rather than Sirius ultimately led to a series of tragic events that would change the course of history. Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, was not infallible. He made the decision to trust the judgment of the Potters and their friend, and it's clear that he had no way of knowing that Pettigrew was not the man he appeared to be. However, Dumbledore's choice to allow the Potters to decide for themselves also highlights the deep personal bond he shared with them. Dumbledore's role in the lives of Harry, James, and Lily was one of guidance and trust, and he wanted them to have control over their own fate. But in doing so, he allowed the Potters to make a choice that would ultimately prove to be their undoing. Sirius's decision to step aside was, in his mind, an act of heroism. He thought that by taking himself out of the equation, he was ensuring the Potters' safety. Unfortunately, the person he trusted most, the one he thought would be a loyal and inconspicuous secret keeper, betrayed him. The pain and regret Sirius felt after the loss of his friends were immeasurable, and the burden of guilt would haunt him for the rest of his life. His unwavering loyalty to James and Lily, his desire to protect Harry, and the feeling of being betrayed by someone he had once considered a friend would shape his every action, even as he fought to clear his name and avenge the deaths of those he loved. Ultimately, the story of the Potters' downfall serves as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of trust. In the world of Harry Potter, even the best of intentions can lead to the worst of outcomes. The bond between Sirius and James, which had seemed so unbreakable, was shattered by the actions of a man they had once called a friend. And Dumbledore, in his wisdom, was unable to prevent the events that led to that tragedy, despite his efforts to ensure the safety of the people he loved. It's a story of trust, betrayal, and the consequences of decisions made in the heat of fear, and it remains one of the most poignant moments in the Harry Potter series.